Hello everybody and welcome back to another video by Funlearn Tutorials. So as promised, in today's video I'm going to be explaining the how we express panel data analysis of univariate type. So today representation of univariate, so single variable data set. So we have the data about a single variable in panel analysis. So this is what we are going to see today, and we essentially will find out that the time factor, the time variable, is a very important and is a very important aspect or a very important component of panel data analysis. So let's do it in matrix form. So essentially univariate data set in panel analysis is represented in data in matrix form. It's not exactly a column form, but we call it a matrix form. So let's suppose we have it's a single variable. So let's say we have, this is our matrix. Now what are the rows and columns? So essentially what we can do is so how we list it is let me write time /cs like this. I'm going to be explaining why I wrote it like this. So let's see, again this is an illustration purpose. When we are actually using panel analysis, we don't write in so much, we just put in I'm going to be saying the notations as well. So suppose this is student 1. So my question remains the same, right? Let me shorten it, student 1. My question remains the same. I want to collect data about the marks of the scores of students. So let's say this time I'm just interested in just marks. So I am going to be looking at as I said, it's univariate analysis. So I'm just going to look at marks of the students, right? Nothing else. I'm just going to see how they change over time. So suppose this is student 1. I have suppose the data for student 2. I have the data for student 3. I have the data for student 4. I have the data for student 5, student 6, and student 7 and student 8. Right, so these are the 8 students that I have. 10 students or 8 students doesn't matter. Let's say there are 8 students, right? So why is it CS? Because this row shows you the different cross sections, hence I have put in CS. It's a cross section. Now what is time? By time I mean I have collected data for 2023, for 2022, for 2021 and for 2020, right? So this, now thing is, cross section and time series are not interchangeable here. You can't just say, oh, I got confused and I put in students on this side and your time on this side. You're not allowed to do that. The cross sections have to go along the rows and the time has to go along the column. So suppose I put in a few numbers, right? 89, 90, I don't know, 83, 74, 69, 68, 7, 83, 50, 60. I'm seeing a different number and putting a different number anyways. So 89, 90, 91, 92. I'm out of ideas, so I'm just going to randomly put in numbers. Suppose there are a lot more numbers here, I'm just assume that. So how am I going to interpret? How am I going to read it? So in 2023, student 1 scored 89, student 2 scored 90, student 3 scored 83, so on and so forth. In the year 2022, student 1 scored 90, student 2 scored something, I don't know, 64 something, so on and so forth. So I have put in the cross sections along the rows, right? So I can see in the year 2023 the different students' scores were these, right? Now, if I am looking at a particular year and I am looking at variation across cross sections, this row, when I am looking at a single row, this actually becomes a cross sectional analysis. So, suppose I have dropped these 3 columns, then this data set is actually a cross sectional data set because it's a single time. So, if it's a single time, the time variable doesn't matter, right? I'm just looking at how these variables change over time. And when I'm putting these years back in, it becomes a panel data. Similarly, if we look at this column, only this column, then it's one student whose score varies over time. So, I'm looking at the time variation. So, this column wise, I have time series analysis. If I drop all these variables, then my data set becomes a time data, time set. It's a time series analysis. But if I add in everything, it becomes a panel data set. So, where is the role of, like, where does pooled come into play? If it had been pooled data set, I wouldn't have had this row which specifies the students here. Because in pooled data set, you may not have the data for student 1 for all the years. You may not have this data for student 2 for all these years. Then that would be a pooled data. Note that it's possible that you don't have, suppose the data for student 4 in 2023. Suppose that student hadn't been enrolled in 2023, or let me say the student 1 had not been enrolled in 2020. And I don't have the data for student 1. That is possible for panel data as well, but then you have to account that no, I don't have the data, but it would have helped me if I had that data, but I don't have that data, and you have to accept that. But in case of pooled data, you can just skip and say, nah, I don't need that data, I'm just going to skip that and I'm going to go for all the others. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 students, 4 years, I have 32 data points. I don't need one single data variable. I don't care if I don't have the data for student 1 in 2020. It would have helped, of course. I would have just got one more data point. Other than that, it wouldn't have helped me. But in panel data, knowing that the student scored 79, I don't know what I put before, knowing that the students 1 scored 79 in 2020 is an integral part of my analysis, and that plays a role in my results as well. So, this is how I represent a single variable. So, marks, these are all the marks of the students for panel data, and thus you can see that which year I am talking about plays a role in my analysis. So, in 2021, how did student 3 score? So, that is sort of the significance in how the role of time is so important in panel data, but it's not at all important in pooled data. So, that is the univariate analysis. In the next video, I am going to be talking about a different representation, how we convert univariate to a column. This is a matrix, right? It's rows and columns. So, if we want panel data for multivariables, then I need one more dimension, right? I have to list the different variables. This entire matrix is for marks. Where do I list in all the other variables? So, what we do is we shorten or we summarize this matrix into a column, and we put in more data for the different columns, and I am going to be explaining how multivariate data can be represented for panel analysis in my next video. So, do look forward to it and stay tuned to it. Thank you.